that could lead potentially to a hot exchange between China and the US. Because if that were to happen, all cards are off the table. It's complete.
An opportunity, Meki, would
100%.
would arise in which
100%.
that would be to China's favor if America was in disarray. Likewise, the other way around too, right?
Yeah, 100%. But think about it this way for a second, right? Think about the scenario. So it's okay. Look, right now we do have this pandemic, whatever it is, around. It's stuff is happening. People are losing. So economies forget the people that have died, are sick, and all the precautions that are taken around, not becoming sick, etc. But the knock-on effect on the economy is, of course, there. It's there. It's a real thing. Unemployment is rising, etc., etc. So that's one factor, but it's everywhere around the world. Now, from a natural point of view, natural disasters, etc., United States is being hit. Fires, hurricanes. China's being hit. Storms, flooding, etc., and others as well. So I think we need to watch the other players. We need to watch countries like India. We need to watch countries like Russia, other countries potentially as well that could take this time as an opportunity to, I don't know, land grab, power grab, whatever, right? Because right now, to mount any global or organized response to anything that might threaten the stability of our global family, as it were, would be severely hamstrung. So if you had any designs on anything at all, anywhere, with anyone, I think right now is the time where you could make the most out of it. So if I were a supervillain, like in James Bond, I would go out now and start doing things, right? Because this is the time when there's probably the least repercussion to be expected.
You still there?
That's what I think. There you go. I'm still here. Yeah, that's my thought. Now let's get into today's topic. And last week we started reading a letter from Dr. T.J. Robertson, who was, I guess, probably the premier scientific investigator engaged into or by Project Starchild. We did obtain permission from Lloyd Pye's wife to use the information from the Starchild Project webpage, which we have been and are doing. It has nothing to do with the current research. Okay, so anything that has happened, since Project Starchild was, effectively became defunct, we're not making any comments on that. I will make a comment on it next week. We've done some digging, and there's some contradictory findings in that report. But just because it contradicts what was found by the Starchild Project doesn't invalidate it. Okay, so we've got now two sets of data. Over here's one set, and over there's another set of data. The question is, which is the set of data that has more credibility? And I will go through that with you at a later point. Suffice it to say that there were a number of scientists involved in this that found a number of different things, and they ruled out categorically, Dave. They categorically ruled out that the Starchild skull is a deformed human. That's right. We shared with you the reasons. I will share with you the reasons again, and Dave and I will do that. And we will also show you what the new data said. And the new data, and it's only published on WordPress, which is interesting, but that's neither here nor there. They specifically talk about skull deformities, Dave, that had already been ruled out very, very thoroughly with solid reasons as well. Yeah. But they go back to that. So they also said they couldn't find any of the fibers, etc., etc. So I'll take it with a grain of salt. That's my opinion. Okay, but look, let's read the letter here from Dr. T.J. Robertson. This letter was written by Dr. Robertson, and he was at the time probably the world's premier expert on the Starchild skull. And he examined the Starchild skull at length. In fact, he had it in his possession for 2 years. And I think it was 10 or 12 people, his scientific colleagues and friends, that also investigated the skull at the same time with him. And we shared the study with you. But this particular letter was written in response to one of his critics. Okay. And the critic said that Dr. Robertson either did not exist or was in fact not qualified. Now, Dr. Robertson was quite old, apparently, at the time that the Star Child project kicked off. I'll just share this with you. So, dear Mr., we don't know who you wrote the letter to. If you wish to check out my credentials, I graduated from the University of Manitoba School of Medicine in May of 1963. So he would have been in his 20s in 1963, which was now, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. It's 60 years ago. So he's now in his 80s. Okay, so clearly he's no longer practicing. I looked up the address where that he gave in the letter here, which is Suite 1879-1641 Lonsdale in North Vancouver. Okay, and it's now a strip mall. So clearly they probably tore down his building, and then they have since built a strip mall there. If anybody out there in the world is still in contact with Dr. T.J. Robertson, and I will actually go back to the Star Child Skull project and ask them if they still have his contact details, I will do that so I can share it with our listenership. But right now, if you were to look for that address, that's now a strip mall. Okay, and it's very new. If you look at the Google Earth pictures, it's a very new strip mall. Now, he also obtained a specialty degree in plastic and reconstructive surgery from the Royal College of Surgeons of Canada in September of 1971, and his certificate is number 169. So you can say what you want about him, but he would understand skeletal, facial, and skull anatomy. I would think, after doing that degree, right, Dave? That makes perfect sense. Now he further goes on. I've known Lloyd Pye since about 1998, having met him at a conference at the University of British Columbia. Although not a man of letters, meaning he didn't have any MBA or medical degrees, etc. Lloyd has always relentlessly sought the truth, wherever it might lead him. Consequently, he has earned my respect with his intellectual honesty and attitude towards scientific research. He approached me about a year after we first met and asked me whether I would participate in research on the so-called Star Child skull, as he was aware of my background in medicine and plastic surgery, with knowledge of cranial surgery and cranial anatomy. Having agreed to his request, Lloyd delivered the skull to my possession in 1999. It remained in my possession for a period of about 2 years. This afforded me the time required to carry out extensive investigation of the skull, and I involved numerous specialist friends and colleagues of mine in the investigation. These gentlemen were specialists in the disciplines of radiology, ophthalmic surgery, oral surgery, craniofacial surgery, neurology, and pediatric neurosurgery. So specifically children neurosurgery. Dave, why don't you tell us why the skull is remarkable?
I don't know which page we're at the moment.
Okay.
I tried to follow it.
Page 12. The skull is remarkable, he goes on. It is humanoid, but unlike any skull I've ever seen. So it's completely different. And in his 49 years of experience as a medical doctor and plastic surgeon, he has never seen anything like it. So, and these are the points now he makes. A carbon-14 dating of the skull places it at the age of 900 years, plus or minus 40 years. Nobody disputes the age of the skull. I want to be very clear here. It is remarkably light and weighs about half of the weight of a human adult skull. The cranial capacity is about 1600 cc, which is 400 cc's larger than an average human adult of the same size. It is composed of a bony material, which is so hard that the standard Dremel blade had great difficulty cutting it to harvest samples for DNA analysis, making a diamond-coated blade more useful. The biochemical mineral analysis, or bone or histochemistry rather, shows a different composition than mammalian bone. This analysis was conducted in England at a later date. Scanning electron microscopy, which is SEM, indicates the presence of strange fibers of an unknown nature. These are not artifactual. They are also a mystery. There's also a mysterious red residue that can be seen in the cancellous holes on the seam microscopic cross-sections of the bone. The frontal sinuses are absent on X-ray and CT scans. The X-rays and CT scans were carried out by Dr. David Hodges at the Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster, BC, British Columbia, on September 3, 1999. Met with Dr. Ken Poskett, an experienced pediatric neuroradiologist at BC's Children's Hospital. Upon reviewing the photos of the skull, the X-rays, and the CT scans, he stated they had never seen anything like it. Dr. Poskett has reviewed tens of thousands of pediatric skull X-rays. So I want to be very clear. This is a person that's an expert on children's skulls. Children's skulls. Because one of the criticisms always is that they compared the Star Child skull to an adult human skull. All right, but they took it to experts that understood children's skulls. A bony prominence on the posterior aspect of the skull, known as the inion, to which the ligamentum nuchae and trapezius muscle consistently attach in humans and primates, is absent. Dave, tell us about the eye sockets.
Yeah, this is what I knew where this is kicking off from last week. The eye sockets are very shallow, and there are other characteristics of the configuration of the posterior orbital foramina that are highly unusual and that differ significantly from that of humans. Dr. Anthony Townsend, an experienced senior eye surgeon, was struck by the shallowness of the orbits. He said that this could be consistent with anophthalmos, a congenital absence of the eyes. What contradicts this, however, is the presence of large optic foramina, which suggests that the being was sighted. Dr. Hugh Parsons, a prominent retinal surgeon, further states that if the being were anophthalmic, the entire orbit would be small. I therefore conclude that I am on solid grounds in stating that the being was most likely sighted. There is no evidence that the flattening of the posterior aspect of the skull was the result of cradle boarding and the type of flattening that is present and distinctly different from what would be present in cradle boarded infants. I have worked, this is the author, I have worked with Paul Tessier, a pioneering leader in craniofacial surgery in France. I have seen every type of craniofacial deformity known to exist. The skull did not result from any known congenital deformity. The being was not hydrocephalic. Hydrocephaly is a common deformity which is characterized by entirely different deformities from the anatomical characteristics seen in the skull. The CT scans were reviewed by two prominent craniofacial surgeons, Dr. Ian Taylor, who was at the Mayo Clinic at the time, and Dr. Joe Gruss of Seattle. Both said that they had never seen anything like it. Standard measurements of the skull, normally conducted by an oral surgeon in New Westminster, BC, revealed that the measurements of this skull were 10 standard deviations away from the median of the bell curve. I like how that worked in for the first hour, Mackie. This is an extraordinary finding, he says. The baseline studies to establish the norm for these measurements were conducted by an oral surgeon in Michigan and were done on a database of several thousand Aboriginal or First Nation North American skulls. One can only reasonably conclude from these statistical studies that the Star Child skull is distinctly different from human. Now, Mickey, I just want to say that remember the age. Was it 800 years?
900.
900 years, give or take 40 or something like that.
Yep.
So that was pre-colonization, is what we're talking about here in North America.
Even prior to the Spanish. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, the skull is a fascinating enigma. It is real. It is different from any human skull I've ever personally or found in the medical literature. Despite my age, I continue to be involved in aspects of medical research at UBC, and I follow the Star Child story with great interest. I hope that Lloyd will one day soon have raised sufficient funds to analyze the entire DNA genome of his specimen. Research to date on about 10% of the genome indicates significant differences from human or from any known primate or any other specimen in the NIH database. I do not care to speculate, he says, on its origins, extraterrestrial or otherwise, as I prefer to base my opinions on evidence-based research. If you have any other questions, I shall be happy to answer them. Yours truly, and this is the author, T.J. Robinson, M.D., LMCC, FRCS, and then C.
Quite an accomplished medical professional. Now, I want to say, this is all we're going to share with you for now on the Star Child skull. There's a couple of things I need to point out here. It was investigated for a long time, and for 2 years, in fact, and the people that investigated it, just to refresh your memory, the list of the scientists were Dr. Fred Smith, Dr. David Hodges, Dr. John Baczynski, Dr. Ken Poskett, Dr. Ian Jackson, Dr. John McNichol, Dr. Mike Kaborda, Dr. Tony Townsend, Dr. Hugh Parsons, and Dr. David Sweet. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then including Dr. Robertson, 11. So 11 doctors, 11 scientists, medical professionals have had a hand in providing this report that we shared with you, right? So that's that. And since then, of course, unfortunately, Lloyd Pye has passed away. The skull is back with the owner. That's okay. The project Star Child has been discontinued. There's now another body that undertook some studies. But the only mention of that particular report, I find it odd, but nonetheless, I only found it on the actual original WordPress site where it was published. No one else has picked it up and published it anywhere. Because if I was a debunker, that's the first thing I would do. I go, boom, there it is, right? Easy. What we have seen though now, the Star Child story is effectively dead in the water. Why? Because number one, the prime or chief investigator, if you will, researcher, Lloyd Pye has passed away. Right? He was the driving force. Like I said, I met him a couple of times, and I was lucky enough to have a brief conversation with him. But he was. Look, I'm actually a pretty good judge of character, and Dave has known me for a long time.
Yes.
And he can disagree with that.
For Mickey's character.
But he struck me as a person. He struck me as a person that was truly driven by the mysterious. He wanted to really get to the bottom of this. I mean, this is just something that you don't come across every day. It's a physical piece of evidence. You can't talk it away. There it is, right? And now, so in another study, like I said, and I'm going to share the content, or we will share the content with you maybe next week or the week after, depending if we've got guests. But there is now a study that says, oh no, this is all nonsense. No, everything that was found by these 12 scientists is nonsense, not true, it didn't happen. We couldn't find any fibers, etc., etc. And what we found was, in fact, X, Y, and Z. This is what we found. And now, of course, the question is, who do you believe? Right? This is really now a question down to as to. I would like to see more published evidence around it. I would like to maybe have get the Star Child skull to a public museum where it can be more investigated more and really see if there are any fibers, because the fibers were only visible with an electron microscope. And in the study that was undertaken by the people that published on WordPress, electron microscopy was not mentioned in their report. So Lloyd never said you can see it with your naked eye. No one ever said that. You actually had to. Electron microscopes are pretty powerful if you know what they are. You really have to want to see something small in order to get one of those, and they were only visible there. So. Yes, but with the naked eye, and I agree that they wouldn't have been visible, right? But we'll share that report with you as well. And now that the owner of the skull is no longer interested in pursuing any further research, so the story of the Star Child skull has come to an effective end unless it can be revived somehow. And I don't have $7 million to conduct any testing, I can tell you that. But ultimately, that's all it needed. The story just had to die. You didn't have to discredit it even. I mean, you can discredit it a little bit, but you put forward an alternative view, which is fine. Here it is. And any researchers like myself and Dave, they will look at it and go, oh, okay, well, fair enough. I guess someone else did the research and it turned out to be nothing. I'm more skeptical than that in either direction, by the way, not just this direction. I just find the answers that that Dr. Robertson's report provides me with are more profound and better thought out.
I think the research is evident, Mickey, the knowledge that
it's better.
They've experienced to be the person making the judgment. That is so much, to me, more highly prized than someone without credentials or just trying to knock it down for no reason whatsoever. They're really supporting their arguments with a great detail. Yeah,
and that's exactly right. Whereas we didn't get that. We didn't get that with the other report. And again, I tell you what, I'll put it in the chat. And then we can discuss it at some later point. And it was really only the DNA stuff they did. They only did the final DNA results. None of the people here that were cited in the report had the kind of credentials that were listed in Dr. Robertson's report. Okay, so let's look. We'll share with you the detail, and we do that because it's really important that everybody gets the whole picture. But in the chat, I will put the link to that.
Which is basically a reminder to everybody that this is, a new form of radio. This is radio that you can interact with us while we're on air. And so jump into the chat room. If you don't know, or you're watching this on YouTube at some point in the future, there's a freedomslips.com has a chat room. Jump into there, and you can talk to us while we're on air.
Look, that's right. But see, and if I were, and look, I'm going to put this out there. I've got an opinion on this. My opinion is just looking at the nature of the skull, etc., etc. I think it may very well be from an inner earther. I know I'll get a little grief for that, but it's my opinion only. I'm not saying that's what it is. That's my opinion. And the best way to let it die is just like that. Let it die. Let the story die. It'll just disappear. In the same way, and this is a bit of a segue, that some of the stories that we're going to share with you next have died. You just wait until everybody that was connected to it has died, literally died. You no longer have to worry about anything. Why? Because anybody who knew anything about anything is gone.
Then it just becomes hearsay,
completely gone, right? Yeah, it's okay, right? Who cares? And it's really important to understand that back in the 19th century, and this is we probably won't get to it today. We found a whole bunch of stuff of really bones, footprints, even tools, etc. But and physical evidence, right? And we don't find it anymore today because, as we discussed before, the way we mine today is very, very different to the way we used to mine. Except in China, they still mine the old way, but nothing leaves China, I guess, right? So look, this is where we are, but. I don't want this to die here, because Lloyd Pye, while he didn't give his life necessarily, he certainly spent a good part of his life pursuing the truth, understanding what this is. And I don't know what it is. Am I saying it's an alien human hybrid? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is it could be another species of human, or more to the point, and this is really where it gets interesting, Dave. Remember how we talked about how the human race is not actually the human race anymore, really, not the one, even if you're biblically inclined, not even Adam's children. So we've had a number of extinction-level events, a number of catastrophes, we believe, in the past, which wiped out large tracts of the human population in the past. And all the stories tell us that a new human race came about. I'm not saying that all of the old human races were all killed off, but most of them were. And that's, I think, where the hominids come in, Bigfoot, etc. as well, right? I think there's a whole bunch to be said about that. And I believe that the human race was a lot more varied and complex in the dim and distant past. But if you've got an original species, let's call them the Homo sapiens originals, right? And they developed a civilization. They went underground because it just makes more sense to live underground in large cavity systems, and because you're protected from radiation, you're protected from weather, you're protected from everything, right? In meteor impacts, there's massive protection if you're fairly deep in the earth, and it just makes sense to do that if you've got the technical and technological abilities. And maybe the Star-Child skull is a descendant of one of those races, and there might be many in the inner Earth, right? I'm not talking about a hollow Earth here. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying the planet that we live on is a hollow planet. What I'm saying is there are massive cave systems inside the Earth, in the mantle even, where civilization, I believe, is possible if you have the technology. That's my opinion. And that's where we get a lot of UFO stories. And I also believe that civilization, or those civilizations, are actively engaged in interstellar travel, interdimensional travel for all I know, right? And I do believe that aliens, true aliens, not people that can actually interbreed with us, right, come to this planet as well. I don't think there's any interbreeding possible with any life form that developed on another planetary system.
No,
it's just
could
not
be possible. Unless,
logically,
of course, we were all
right?
we were all of the same seed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that could be also, if you go back far enough, maybe we see it everywhere.
Just knowing, Mickey, that the hominids were able to replicate with each other because of, otherwise we would only have one genus in our history, for instance. We would only have Florensis, or only have Neanderthal, or only have, what's the other one?
Yes.
Yeah, we would only have one
couple
of them in our genetic history.
And that's a new one.
We'd only have one, but we don't. Our DNA, when you go to Ancestry.com and they tell you, half Viking, blah, blah, this, whatever it is, right? Northern European, Southern Europe, I don't care where you're from, it's fine. But to show that there's a little sliver there showing Denisovian, or a little sliver there with Florensis or whatever it is, right? Or Neanderthal, or, the greater Pacific region. What? Yeah. That means they were able to interbreed. Same species. So Mickey, I agree with you. I've sort of been under the impression for almost all my life, like it was programmed into me when I was a kid, that the Earth is, maybe in the, what's it called, not the star child, but not the skull, the university you go to during abductions. I've under the belief, Mickey, that the Earth was sort of like a little zoo for the local star cluster. I don't know. It's such a silly idea, but I was always under that impression that all of the successful things from all about, because the stars pop. Stars have a finite lifespan, and the planets around them in the habitable zone only end up with a certain period of time for the life on the planet, despite all the other extinctions. So if there was a star going to go supernova, and we had the tech, you and I'd go there and I'd rescue some stuff off it and bring it here and let it go.
More to the point. While I'm not saying it, I think that there might be probably a more sinister purpose for our planet, especially for the surface dwellers.
Good luck with
that we are.
On the surface, right?
Because again, the inner Earth dwellers, I think they're in charge, and the surface dwellers are not. But it may very well be a livestock scenario. And I thought about this long before Jupiter Ascending, the movie, came out, or any other science fiction novel. As a child. And then as a teenager, actually, I wrote a little short story at the beginnings of it called Harvest, where, imagine, this was back in the 80s, by the way, okay? And I'm not saying that anyone stole from me. I never published it, but I still have the hard copy that I printed. I actually wrote it on a typewriter. Wow. So cool. That's how old that is. And it was called Harvest. And essentially what I said, people would come down and to harvest human beings. I was still trying to figure out why. I mean, it was looking for a reason, But anyway, it was an idea that I had as a preteen and then teenager. But the point here is that it could be more sinister. Maybe we're needed for certain things. I mean, it makes sense because the cattle mutilations only happen with livestock, so they only happen with domesticated animals. Is my point. Very rarely with wild animals. Very rarely, and human beings. Which might very well put us into the livestock category. And if you look at our biological, physiological, and genetic makeup, we have got more in common with livestock, like domesticated animals, than we have with wild animals. A lot more, in many ways, right? So Dave, I agree with you. It could be a menagerie. It could be a zoo. It could be a livestock pen. I don't care what you call it, right? And maybe at a certain point, harvest comes again, and maybe that's what this whole civilization ending event is about. Coming, similar, I guess, to the movie Jupiter Ascending. Again, not something necessarily that we take inspiration from, but certainly it's an interesting thought experiment. Having said that, the human race is no longer the original human race, in my opinion. In fact, we're not even the ones, in my opinion, that were interfered with by the Anunnaki, right? We're not those ones either. Okay, we are now maybe the third or fourth iteration along those lines, getting increasingly shorter lifespans as we go along, becoming increasingly less capable of things. Right? We're still capable, but imagine what we would have been capable if we could live to 1,000 years or to 10,000 years. Oh, what crazy talk, Mackie. Yeah, within our frame of reference, in our little box of the possible, that's completely crazy talk.
Yeah. Yeah. So think about our view and how long game view we would have to model ourselves on. From a governance perspective, none of these short 4-year circles where we that's not even a blink of an eye if you live 10,000 years. What a waste of time that'd be, voting every 4 years. Yep. Yeah, probably. Yep. Yeah. Subspace is a thing. The Mayfly example, Mickey. Just like our pets, Mickey. Our pets. As adults, we don't age at all, and they go from, puppy to old age in a very short period of time, comparatively. They don't see us age. Yeah. Because they were physically here at one point, right? These beings. Yeah. That's what we do. Floriensis. Oh, it never died out. Look, here's one here. Terrible eating. Yeah. Wow. I've got it. That's the 10th of April, 2019. Yeah, sure. So archaeologists just pried another secret from our past from the clutches of the earth. Very dramatic. Welcoming a new human species to our growing family tree. This discovery began with an ancient foot, or what was left of one, a foot bone, called the third metatarsal, which, if you don't know, that they're toes, was found in the Callao cave in the Philippine island of Luzon back in 2007. The oldest known Homo sapiens remains found nearby on Palawan Island were dated to 30 to 40,000 years ago. We're still not talking about a great length of time here. But the mysterious foot is older, dated to about 67,000 years ago. And the quote, "It is the earliest hominin ever found in the Philippines." Archaeologists Florent Detroit from the Museum of National d'Histoire Naturelle in France told Science Alert. Now, an international team uncovered 12 other bits of ancient humans in the same layer of rock where the foot bone was found. These include more foot bones, hand bones, and partial femur and teeth, thought to belong to at least 3 separate individuals, 2 adults and a child. Detroit explained how the fossils are familiar, yet to our bones and other known human species, their premolar teeth have traits seen in Australopithecus and Homo erectus, but their molars, while smaller, have a shape more similar to those found in Homo sapiens. I don't know where the half, that's okay, I don't know where the halfway point is. I keep going. Yeah, cool. So Homo luzonensis, toe bone. Is there? Okay. And that was found in that's the Callao cave archaeology project. The foot bones, particularly the toe bone called the phalanx, are also a lot more curved than ours are, suggesting that they may have been better climbers. Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I still dispute that, yeah. That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So the Atacama skeleton, and you can see it. It's on the thumbnail image for the video. The DNA analysis of the premature human fetus identified unusual mutant. So let me premise this. This is a. Where did this come from again, Meki? No. The paper we're talking about here. Yeah. All right. So okay. So there you go. So you have a baseline. So that. Yeah. Okay. So this isn't our opinion. This comes from Wikipedia. DNA analysis of the premature human fetus identified unusual mutations associated with dwarfism and scoliosis, although other research contested genetic abnormalities, finding that the skeleton showed normal fetal development. There is unfounded speculation by people such as the UFO theorist Stephen Greer, that Atta is an extraterrestrial. Such speculation led to Atta's inclusion in the 2013 UFO movie Sirius and captured the attention of Stanford University geneticist Gary P. Nolan, who contacted the production team and analysed the remains of the skeleton. These results of his DNA analysis are inconsistent with the aforementioned speculations that the skeleton could be of extraterrestrial origin. Meki. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so what's the controversy about this? A subsequent study by the international research team led by University of Otago bioarchaeologist Associate Professor Sian Halcrow questioned the study published in March 2018 by Nolan, stating, "As experts in human anatomy and skeletal development, we find no evidence for any of the skeletal anomalies claimed by the authors. Their observations of anomalies represent normal skeletal development in the fetus, cranial moulding from delivery, and potential post-mortem taphonomic effects, and that the team was skeptical concerning the genomic results. The authors also raised ethical concerns about the work by Nolan, saying, "Studies such as these that do not address ethical considerations of the deceased and their descendant communities threaten to undo the decades of work anthropologists and others have put in to correct past colonialists' tendencies." The publisher of the early study, Genome Research, responded by stating that the ethical standards did not cover work on specimens of uncertain biological origins, such as the Atacama skeleton, but also stated their intention to review their own policies on such studies. The authors of the Genome Research article published a response acknowledging the ethical concerns and calling for the repatriation of the remains. They distanced themselves from possible ethical missteps by largely claiming ignorance about the handling of the remains and the circumstances of the discovery, and noting that they were presented with roughly a cubic millimetre of bone to analyse. Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just give me a sec. Just doing the imaging. Okay. Keep going. Just keep rolling. Mm-hmm. Sprites. Yeah. Fairies. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the new study uses a giant database of what Nolan called phenotype genetic correlations. An individual's phenotype is the collection of his or her characteristics, including height, eye color, earwax wetness. For instance, genes, as well as the environment, influence a phenotype. Of her billions of nucleotides, which are the single bricks that make up her genes, the authors identified 3 million variations. This massive database is similar in concept to a social network mined by a research firm, Nolan said. If Cambridge Analytica collects enough of your likes and dislikes, it could predict your political preferences. Likewise, with enough genes, researchers can predict which individuals will have similar phenotypes. In many cases, Atta's genes match the individuals with bone disorders. She did not have an unusual number of mutations, though. Nolan said what was exceptional was where they were concentrated. This is the super rare human phenotype, said co-author Sanchita Bhattacharya. That'll do. A bioinformatics researcher at the University of California in San Francisco. Atta is one of the rarest we have ever observed, being only 6 inches and having this advanced bone age. The USCF's biomedicine professor Utul Butte, who created the database, said Atta had 64 unusual mutations linked to the skeletal system. Among these, scientists found 2 variants new to scientific literature that code for an abundant structural protein called collagen, as important to our bones as steel to a skyscraper. All told, the story in her genes is tragic. Given multiple mutations identified in this specimen, one could speculate it didn't survive long. Bhattacharya said even if she was born alive. Given her origin, one could imagine, Nolan said, a distraught mother bringing her infant to a priest. It was found supposedly in a house next to a church, which to me says rectory, he said. The body was positioned as if lying in a state, arms to the side, and then time goes by, he speculated, and it gets forgotten or the priest dies. Nolan said he does not blame the owner for wanting to study Atta. After all, it took a team of 10 scientists 5 years to figure out what she is. Nor did he... Oh, there's the music. We're going to... we'll catch you next week. Stay tuned for Jer Bear's great roundtable, and don't forget to call in and donate to the station. Take care, everyone.